Okay, so everybody has been discussing these conference calls that are floating around all over YouTube, and this has to do with the whole economic state of the world, and there's a lot of alarm bells that have been ringing, and it's some pretty serious stuff. So I caught wind of this I'd probably want to say Sunday night, maybe Monday, and I've been researching it ever since, and some people have been asking me what I thought about it, so here we go. These conference calls were put together by a group called G.E.T, G-E-T, and it's basically 3 partners, and I guess they have like their support crew. Now, these 2 conference calls that we're discussing here, the first was 2 hours long, the second was an hour and a half. In the first conference call, there was the group from G.E.T talking to this one secret mysterious insider guy, and then in the second conference call, they had 2 insiders, I think it was a guy and a girl, and again, no names were given, they were using like code names and stuff. Okay, so this is the group that was involved in setting up the conference call, and they've apparently been doing this for a while, and let me touch on the stuff that they discussed in both the conference calls. Now, both these conference calls are really interesting. If you have an extra 4 hours, you might want to sit down and watch them. All links to all this stuff will be provided in the description box. The crux of what they were talking about has to do with what they call world global settlements. Supposedly, there's $47 trillion in a basket of funds that is supposed to be shortly dished out to 140 countries. 27 trillion of this money is supposed to go to the US. The purpose of this world global settlement is basically as an economic reset for the whole world. Okay, it's, again, this is all according to them, it's the end of all fiat currencies, the end of the Federal Reserve, and it's the implementation of commodity-based currencies. Specifically for the US, we're supposed to be on the verge of switching to a treasury-based dollar. So no longer would we have the Federal Reserve dollars that we have in our wallets right now. It would now be a new treasury-based dollar. And again, the treasury-based dollar would now be based on commodities. I believe they were saying only precious metals, but actually I think they kind of contradicted themselves. I think they said only PMs at one point, but then other commodities like oil or maybe land or whatever might be thrown into the mix as well. The Chinese, according to them, are supposedly behind this whole thing. They're taking the reins, and they're basically forcing all of this through. In the first conference call, the guy speaks, if you read between the lines and pay attention, he speaks sort of highly, very highly of China, which I found to be a red flag, no pun intended. They also talk about, in these conference calls, the NESARA, or the National Economic Stabilization and Recovery Act. That'll come in important in a minute. They also discuss the CMKX, which is a part of this basket of these funds with all this $47 trillion. And this CMKX part of it is a $4 trillion fund. But that'll also come into play in a minute, so I just wanted to point that out. Finally, this whole thing revolves around the dinar, the Iraqi dinar. Now, of course, the Iraqi dinar is the money used in Iraq. When the U.S. invaded Iraq, they basically took complete control over the Iraq economy, and they flooded Iraq with U.S. dollars, and they pumped up the Iraq economy with these new Iraqi dollars, and supposedly they're saying the Federal Reserve owns 49% of the Central Bank of Iraq, and the U.S. Treasury owns 51%. It's also a key thing. So really quick, those were all the things that these guys discussed in this conference call, and some of those obviously they have super huge implications. Now let me go on to discuss what I'll phrase the debunking of this, because like I said, I've been researching this for like a week or so. Well, yeah, just about a week, and this is what I dug up. Okay, first off, the G.E.T group. Now, if you go to their website here, okay, and I have to play this. This is the song from their website. So like I said, there are 3 partners, and these guys, they have like a picture of the 3 amigos on their site. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. And this site looks, it's a total crap site. I mean, it's totally unprofessional. It's showcasing some Lazy Days RVs, like they're selling RVs or something, and there's broken links. The copyright is for 2010. It's just really, really unprofessional. So to me, this is a really big red flag, how apparently these guys who are supposed to be like top level guys in, you know, the economic industry or whatever, that they have this really shitty website. Also, big red flag is they have a donations button on their website where you can donate in increments of $10. I mean, what's that about? Okay, next up, as I mentioned, they reference the NESARA in one of their conference calls, and this is the National Economic Stabilization and Recovery Act. Now, if you research the NESARA on its own, this was supposedly, the sources of NESARA say that this was actually went into law, and it's this whole list of all these crazy, crazy, extreme things that supposedly are taking place, like the end of the IRS, the end of the Fed, all debts forgiven, like all, you have the link in there, you can go check it out. I mean, there's like a lot of background on this. But in researching this, I found this one link that says the NESARA scam, and it says the NESARA Act was a legislative proposal that merely introduces an alternative currencies to help combat anti-inflationary policies of the paper currency. So supposedly this was a proposal written up by some lawyer guy, and it was sent to some congressmen and, you know, put on some people's desks, but it was never enacted into law. And this link that I'll give you, it goes into a whole bunch of detail, and it just totally calls it out as a scam. And it says that like all these people were conned into investing money based on this NESARA thing going into law, and it never did. Also, I went onto the GovTrack website, which lets you track all the bills that are, you know, have gone through Congress. And when I put in the National Economic Stabilization and Recovery Act, I get 67 bills that matched the title, but none of them are specifically that title. They're just like the Drug Court Reauthorization Act or the Better Use of Light Bulbs Act. So it must have that verbiage in it somehow for it to come up in the search. Okay, so NESARA, huge red flag. Okay, another thing is they point out in the phone conference that we're going to get through this whole mix-up in this world global settlements and all this stuff, that we're going to get a bunch of money, okay? Our current national debt is 14 trillion, and they were throwing out the number that we're going to specifically get 7 trillion to go into the treasury and I guess get put towards the debt, whereas before that they said 27 trillion to be distributed to the US in its entirety. But they specifically said 7 trillion to go towards the debt. Now, that leaves 7 trillion of our debt to deal with, right? So that's what's up with that. But that doesn't take into consideration our unfunded liabilities, which are estimated to be between 100 and 200 trillion. So another major red flag on their logic here. Okay, next thing is I found a link here. It's from OXF Online. The title is U.S. Treasury Approves Gold Dollars, America's New Legal Tender. You can now use this gold-backed cash to potentially double your savings over the next 6 to 9 months. The Treasury Department has officially approved a historic switch. Starting days from now, you'll be able to exchange regular paper dollars for a more valuable form of money. Experts are calling America's new legal currency gold dollars because each dollar will be backed by 1 gram of pure gold. So this sounds very similar to what these guys are talking about. The problem is this article that I'm reading to you right now is from like 2008 or 2009. I'm not even 100% sure, but it talks about upcoming dates in 2009, so it's got to be before November 24th, 2009. So this same exact thing has been around for a couple years. So that's another huge big red flag. Okay, another thing is in their second conference call, they point out that this plan is imminent The Iraqi dinar is supposed to have happened last night, or they say the next night, or something like this. And this was put out. This conference call was from the 18th of January, and we're now in the early February, and that didn't happen. So that was false. Also, in doing the research on this, I found some other like private blogs and stuff, and one of the complaints is that these guys, the G.E.T team, constantly comes out with a date for something, and then it doesn't happen, and they push it back. And this is seen in a number of people that have complained, and that kind of coincides with what I just said, that they said in the conference call on the 18th that the Iraqi dinar was supposed to revalue that night, or the night before, or the night after, like immediately at that time, and it didn't. The next thing that I'll point out is the CMKX. This is one of the funds that they specifically cite that it's a $4 trillion fund that has to do with, you know, helping out the U.S. specifically. And if you Google that, you'll come up with all sorts of people complaining that they were ripped off, that there's lawsuits, that the CMKX is a fraud. So again, links in the description box. There's one site that I found, consumeraffairs.com, and it's just person after person. It's like 3 pages worth saying that this CMK Diamonds stock is like total fraud and they lost a bunch of money. And it's like 3 pages worth, and it goes back through at least through 2008. So this has been something that's been going on for a while. Again, I don't know exactly what's going on here, but it's definitely associated with that. So it's obviously a big red flag. At 67 minutes, if you listen to the second conference call and you jump to the 67-minute point, you'll hear one of the speakers in the conference. He says, well, if this is a wealth redistribution where you're trying to level out the playing field, because that's what they claim, he says that the person on top has to come down and the person on the bottom will go up. And he points out, but the U.S. is on top, so that means that we're going to have to come down, and that's not going to be the good for the U.S. And he poses that question to this people on the conference call, and they basically dodge the question, and they say, oh no, the settlement fund will be large enough, it'll have plenty of money, it'll take care of everything. And to me, that made absolutely no sense. So I think that this thing has a lot of holes in it, more holes than a piece of Swiss cheese. Another thing is, I found this site that was showcasing one of the conference calls, and it's called Morning Liberty, and this is the same site that has a specific link to the Restore America plan, and it's showcasing some of those guys that did work with that. And as some of you may know, that the Restore America plan was bogus, and that also had to do with some guy, I forgot his name, but he was like a lawyer guy, and he kept sending lawsuits to the government, trying to like sue them for tons of money, and it was just like a whole fraudulent thing. So the fact that that's on the same site, I couldn't find a direct connection with the people, but to be honest, I didn't spend hours and hours trying to find it. It could be there. Let's see. I guess that's basically it. The last thing I will point out is the links that I'm providing for the conference call. This is a blog that I found. It's weird. It's called Spiritual Truth Blog. I don't know what it has to do with anything except for the fact that the person who's running the blog has been totally keeping up with all the things that this G.E.T group has been putting out. So they're somehow a supporter, or maybe they invested or whatever. And what's really interesting is if you scroll down on one of those links to the related posts, it has a connection to the Zeitgeist Moving Forward World Release, 300 venues, 60 countries. And if you click that, I'll quickly read you the first line. Let's go, computer. Sorry, it's taking a second. The Zeitgeist movement is a very encouraging non-profit movement that proposes a resource-based global economic concept, and it's gaining more steam. So, not that this Spiritual Truth blog is part of the G.E.T group. I mean, they could be. I don't know, but whoever they are, they're supporting the G.E.T group, and they're also supporters of Zeitgeist. And we all know that Zeitgeist is Agenda 21. So, for whatever that's worth. Now, what do I think this whole stuff boils down to, personally, this G.E.T group that's in charge of these conference calls, they obviously have a vested interest in the dinar and trying to get investors to buy it through them, or you know, work with them or whatever, consult, or however they're doing it. I think that the G.E.T people are in the industry, they're in the banking and the investment industry, and like us on YouTube, they're probably getting pieces of information. For instance, they probably found out that the dinar is going to revalue maybe soon. Maybe they even got wind that there is a new treasury-based dollar being shipped to the banks right now. But I don't think any of their world global settlement stuff, I don't think any of that information is correct. I think their whole background and their story is like fraudulent, and I think they just created that to draw people in, to basically get customers. These guys are also like selling books and different things on their websites. If you look through it, you'll find all that stuff. So I think that that's just all a phony baloney stuff. But there might be some pieces of truth that they're picking up on, and we might see some of this stuff come to fruition in some form in the near future. That's basically about all I got. If I find anything else, of course, I will let y'all know. I think that's it. Later, YouTube.